There's a moment when you notice it, not during a crisis, but in something small. A friend says, "That really stressed me out," and you nod, but inside you felt almost nothing, or something happens that should be minor, and your whole body tenses like it's an alarm. You catch yourself thinking, "I don't react to things the way other people do. Not better, not worse, just different." As if your life has been lived in a deeper gravity, where everything lands with more weight than it seems to for everyone else. That's the quiet weight you carry. The way past nights, past fears, past losses have shaped you in places that don't show. Surviving too much doesn't just give you memories, it slowly rewires the architecture of who you are. How you feel, how you trust, how you brace for impact. In this video, we're going to step inside that architecture and gently explore what has happened in you when life has asked you to endure more than your share. There's something that happens to a mind that's had to survive too much, for too long. It doesn't announce itself with a diagnosis or a dramatic moment. It shows up in tiny ways, quiet ways, in the way you move through a room, in the way you answer a text, in the way your body tenses before your thoughts even arrive. Survival leaves fingerprints, and a lot of the time, you only recognise them when you compare yourself to people who haven't had to live the way you did. You notice that they walk into a space and just exist. You walk into the same space and start scanning. Hypervigilance is what we call it in psychology, but you know it as that constant background hum. Who's here? What could go wrong? How do I get out if I need to? Your brain at some point learned that safety wasn't guaranteed. It learned that danger, emotional or physical, could come without warning. And so, it upgraded itself. It sharpened your senses, tuned your attention like a radio to pick up even the smallest static of threat. Maybe you think you're just observant. Maybe you say, "I just notice everything." But underneath that is a nervous system that's been trained like a guard dog, always alert, always on duty, always a little bit ahead of everyone else. If you've lived through chaos, unpredictability, or harm, your brain did something incredibly intelligent. It chose survival over peace. Hypervigilance isn't a flaw. It's a skill you earned by staying alive in places where you were never meant to be calm. The confusing part is what happens later, when the danger has passed, or at least softened, and your mind doesn't know how to stand down. You find yourself jumpy over small things, exhausted after social events for reasons you can't explain, drained from simply being around people, because you haven't just been around them, you've been tracking them, their tone, their shifts in mood, the way their eyes move, the silence between their words. You're not paranoid, you're adapted. Your brain learned that missing a signal could cost you too much, so now it refuses to miss any. But survival doesn't only make you more aware, sometimes it takes awareness away. There's another kind of adaptation, one that looks like the opposite of hypervigilance, but is born from the same need to protect you, emotional numbing. There are only so many times you can be overwhelmed before your mind starts quietly turning down the volume. On joy, on sadness, on hope, on fear. Not because you don't care, but because caring at full volume started to feel dangerous. So you learned how to detach, how to zone out when things got too intense, how to keep your face calm while your body screamed, how to leave the room without moving an inch. Maybe people have called you cold, or distant, or hard to read. What they didn't see was that, at some point, being readable became a liability. Your needs, your tears, your visible pain, those were used against you, ignored or punished. So your mind did what it had to do. It wrapped your emotional life in layers of padding, so nothing could cut straight into you anymore. Emotional detachment isn't a sign that you feel nothing. It's a sign you felt too much, too often, with too little safety. It's not emptiness, it's self-defense. And then there's the strangest paradox of all. On the outside, you can look incredibly strong. You're the responsible one, the one who has it together, the one people rely on, lean on, confide in. You function, you perform, you show up. You've been through hell, and you're still standing. So people call you resilient. They tell you you're so strong. I don't know how you do it. What they don't see is the cost. They don't see you lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a hollowed out version of a person. They don't see the way your body feels heavier than your life. They don't see that what they call strength, you sometimes call numb autopilot. Survival taught you how to keep going, even when parts of you had already stopped. You learned how to show competence while feeling completely disconnected. You learned how to be the reliable one while quietly falling apart inside. This is the paradox of strength after too much. You can be deeply capable and deeply exhausted at the same time. You can carry others and still feel like you're drowning. You can look like resilience and feel like ruins. And when people only praise the outside, they unknowingly reinforce the armor. They tell you, don't take it off. This is who you are. This is what we need from you. And somewhere inside, a quieter voice says, but I'm tired. So you start protecting yourself in more subtle ways. You become good at self-reliance. At first, that also came from necessity. Maybe there was no one to depend on, or the people who were supposed to protect you became the source of your hurt. Your nervous system learned a brutal equation. Need equals risk. Dependence equals danger. So now, trusting others feels like walking into a room with your chest unshielded. Letting someone close feels less like intimacy and more like standing exactly where the blow might land. You tell yourself, I'm better off doing it alone. And in many ways, you are incredibly capable alone. You fix things. You figure things out. You don't wait for rescue, because rescue never came when you needed it most. But that armor of self-reliance has a side effect. It keeps out disappointment, betrayal, abandonment, and it also keeps out genuine support, softness, and care. Maybe you notice that when people offer help, you feel uncomfortable. You don't know how to let your weight rest in someone else's hands. You apologize for being too much, even when you've barely asked for anything. It's not that you don't want to trust, it's that your whole body remembers what happened the last time you did. Surviving too much also changes your relationship with time. When you live in survival mode, time stops being a gentle progression and turns into a series of next moments you have to get through. You're not really in Tuesday at 3 p.m. You're in the next obligation, the next problem, the next potential crisis. Your mind is always leaning forward, braced. What's coming? What might go wrong? How do I make sure I'm ready? Being present becomes a luxury you don't quite believe in. Sitting in a peaceful moment, your body might still feel tense, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Even happiness feels suspicious, like a calm before a storm you haven't spotted yet. And then there's the opposite pull, the past. Sometimes your body's in today, but your nervous system is still in the room where it happened. A smell, a sound, a look someone gives you, and suddenly the present blurs around the edges. Your system reacts now as if you're back there then. That's not you being dramatic. That's your brain saying, last time we missed this, it hurt too much. I won't let that happen again. Survival rewires how you move through time. Less I am here, more what's next, or what if it happens again. It keeps you alive, but it keeps you from fully living. And under all of these adaptations, hypervigilance, numbing, armor, self-reliance, survival time, there is often one more quiet experience people rarely speak about. Grief. The grief for the self you might have been if none of this had happened. You might not always put words to it, but you feel it when you see someone move through the world with an innocence you never had. You feel it when you notice how freely they trust, how easily they rest, how casually they believe that things will probably be okay. There is a version of you that didn't get to grow, a version that might have been softer or sillier or more hopeful, a version that didn't have to scan every room, that didn't learn to shut down big emotions, that didn't need armor just to walk through an ordinary day. Sometimes that grief shows up as anger. Why did I have to learn all of this the hard way? Sometimes it shows up as resignation. It is what it is. I guess this is just who I am. Sometimes it shows up as a faint, aching homesickness for a place you've never been, a self you've never met, but somehow still miss. This grief is not self-pity. It's an honest recognition that your adaptations came at a price. You did what you had to do. You became who you needed to become. And something innocent in you had to step back so that something resilient in you could step forward. The psychological landscape of someone who's gone through too much is not a flat field of brokenness. It's a complex terrain, areas of sharp alertness, valleys of numbness, strong fortresses of self-reliance, fault lines of old fear, and beneath it all, the buried outline of a self that didn't get to fully arrive. If any of this sounds like you, it doesn't mean you're damaged beyond repair. It means your mind and body did exactly what they were designed to do: adapt, protect, endure. The question now is not, what's wrong with me? The question is, what did I survive that taught me to live this way? And what parts of me are ready, slowly, gently, to learn another way? Living after endurance is not a heroic montage. It is not a before and after picture. It is not you getting back to who you used to be. In fact, one of the first quiet griefs of healing is realizing you are never going back to that person. Not because you're ruined, because you're different, because what you've survived has rearranged the architecture of how you feel, how you think, how you move through the world. People love the story where someone returns to normal, but if you've gone through too much, normal, as you knew it, may no longer exist. Your innocence, your old automatic trust, the way your body once moved through a day without scanning for where the exits are, that version of you might be gone. Healing for you isn't about rebuilding that exact bridge. It's about learning how to live with the landscape that's left, and slowly, patiently, creating new paths that can hold the life you still deserve to have. And that process is slow, sometimes painfully slow, because your nervous system didn't just witness threat. It learned it. It memorized it. It built an entire operating system around it. When you've been through too much, your body becomes a historian of danger. The way your heart jumps at sudden sounds, the way your shoulders tense when a phone lights up with a message, the way you automatically rehearse what could go wrong in a room where everyone else just sees four walls and a window. You're not doing that on purpose. That is your nervous system, trained like a guard dog that never got the message the war ended. So healing for you doesn't start with just relax. It starts with tiny, uncertain experiments in safety. Notice how small they are. sitting on the couch and actually letting your back rest against the cushion, instead of perching on the edge, ready to move. Letting your phone be in another room for 5 minutes without checking it 16 times. Realizing you laughed at something, and for half a second, you didn't feel guilty for not being miserable. These moments look meaningless from the outside, but inside, they are negotiations with a body that has learned to expect harm. Each small act says, I'm watching, I'm still paying attention, but in this moment, nothing bad is happening. And your nervous system doesn't trust that at first. It tests you. You might relax for a second and then suddenly feel your chest tighten, your thoughts speed up, your mind tell you something's wrong, you're missing something. That is not failure. That is a hyper-vigilant system doing what it was trained to do. Living after endurance means you will spend a long time teaching your own body that not every quiet is an ambush. Not every calm is the silence before impact. Sometimes quiet is just quiet. Sometimes calm is allowed to stay. Over time, as your body learns this, something else starts to come back online. Your emotional range. Maybe for years you survived by narrowing yourself. You cut off certain feelings because there wasn't room for them. You became sharp where you used to be soft. You became numb where you used to be open. Anger might have become your shield. Detachment might have become your anesthetic. Sarcasm, your way of saying, I don't care, when really you cared so much it would have swallowed you whole if you'd let it. When you have been through too much, vulnerability can feel like walking into a battlefield without armor. So you build a self that doesn't leak, doesn't break, doesn't show. Healing looks like slowly loosening that armor, not throwing it away in one dramatic scene, but adjusting it piece by piece. At first, letting yourself feel again can be terrifying. You might cry in a way that scares you because it's not the tidy, quiet kind. You might feel joy for a moment and then instantly panic, because joy once meant you had something to lose. You might feel tenderness towards someone and immediately want to pull away, because you remember what happened last time you let your guard down. Allowing softness after years of armor is not gentle at the beginning. It can feel like exposure, like stepping out of a bunker and realizing there is sky above you. It's beautiful, and it's too open, and your first instinct is to run back underground. This shows up most clearly in relationships. Because intimacy, real intimacy, is not just closeness, it's being seen. And if your history has taught you that being seen led to being hurt, used, abandoned, or controlled, then of course intimacy feels like walking into a spotlight with no shield. So healing doesn't start as, I trust people again. It begins more quietly, more cautiously. I will let you know a little bit of what I really feel and watch what you do with it. Your relationships might feel complicated because you're holding two truths at the same time. You crave connection and it terrifies you. You want to be held and you flinch when someone gets too close. You want to share your story and you want to never speak of it again. Living after endurance means you might find yourself pulling people in and pushing them away in the same breath. Not because you're playing games, because you're trying to keep your heart alive in a body that doesn't always believe it's safe to love. Healthy relationships for you may look slower. You may need more reassurance, clearer communication, more time to decide. You may say, I need a minute, not because you're rejecting someone, but because your nervous system needs to catch up with what your heart already knows it wants. There is growth here, even if it's hard to see. People talk about post-traumatic growth as if it's a prize you win for suffering, as if the pain is justified because you came out with lessons. But you know better. You know some things should never have happened. No amount of growth makes certain losses worth it. Real post-traumatic growth doesn't erase the cost. It sits beside it. It's the capacity to be more compassionate because you know in your bones what it feels like to unravel. It's the ability to hold complexity, knowing life can be both cruel and beautiful, that people can be both deeply flawed and still worth loving. It's the strength to set boundaries because you have finally understood that your survival was not meant to be endlessly exploited. Growth is you saying, I will never minimize what I went through, and also, I refuse to let it be the only story about me. You didn't choose what hurt you, but you are choosing, slowly and imperfectly, who you become around that hurts. And this becoming is not linear. Healing is not a staircase where you climb one step every day until you reach the top. It's more like the tide. Some days you wake up and there is space inside your chest. You move through your day with a kind of ease that would have shocked the person you were a few years ago. You laugh, you focus, you feel almost normal, and then for reasons that don't always make sense, the water rises. A smell, a date on the calendar, the way someone speaks to you, suddenly your heart is racing, your thoughts are spiraling, your body is back in a place it swore it would never return to. You might think, I've gone backwards, I'm failing, I thought I was past this. But this is how integration works. Old pain and new safety learning to coexist in the same body. A setback doesn't erase progress. It reveals where your system still needs care. A hard day doesn't cancel the good day before it. They stand next to each other, both true. Living after endurance means you're allowed to have both. Days where you feel steady, capable, open. Days where you feel fragile, tired, easily overwhelmed. Healing isn't when the hard days disappear. Healing is when the hard days stop convincing you that you're broken or back at the beginning. When you can say, this is a hard day, instead of, this is my whole life. So if you find yourself in that in-between place, no longer completely surviving, not yet fully at peace, know this. This is what healing actually looks like for many people who've gone through too much. Not a dramatic transformation, not a perfect recovery. Just you, again and again, choosing to stay, to breathe, to soften a fraction of an inch where you used to be hard as stone, to trust for one more minute where you'd rather shut down, to honour what you've been through without letting it be the only lens you look through. This is living after endurance, messy, non-linear, sometimes lonely, often misunderstood, and still quietly, profoundly brave. There is a difference. Broken says, something is wrong with me. Weathered says, something happened to me and I adjusted. The ways you flinch, overthink, shut down, say yes when you mean no, or plan for every disaster, these are not random flaws. They are the shape your nervous system took to keep you here. Evidence of survival, not evidence of failure. You don't have to admire every adaptation to stop hating yourself for it. You can say, this is who I became to survive, and let that sentence loosen the grip of shame. Understanding yourself is not the end of change. It's where real change quietly begins. Not by force, not by bullying yourself into being different, but by walking forward with awareness and a little more kindness than you had before. If this gave you a bit of calm or clarity, consider liking and subscribing, so more people who feel weathered can find their way here too.